A tip of the cap to you. Thank you for joining us here on the Pilot Money Guys flight, which we're calling Why is the Market Tanking and What Should You Do About It? I'm your host, Leading Edge Financial Planning Wealth Manager Rob Eklund. The flight crew joining me today is Certified Financial Planner Charlie Mattingly, call sign Godfather. Welcome, Godfather. And
Thank
happy
you, sir.
haircut to you, by the way.
Nice, yes.
Looking
Going
good.
back to my military days, militant.
Nice. We also have, of course, financial planner Benjamin Dickinson, call sign Viper. Just kidding, you don't get that good.
Dang, that sounded good.
Call sign
cool.
Cowbell. Welcome, Cowbell.
Hey, good to be here. And Tyler, cue the cowbell.
Cue
Nice.
the cowbell. I want my own little cowbell sign for rubber mallet. Do we have a rubber mallet sound I can throw on mine?
I'm sure there's one
Like a
out
thumping
there.
noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to apologize up front here, folks. I have the COVID, and I'm not trying to use my bedroom voice. That's just the way it sounds right now. So bear with me. So
No wonder it sounded
yeah.
so
Right.
good.
I knew this was going to be a good podcast because of that.
Oh my gosh, bedroom
Yes.
voice.
Yes. Aviation news. Let's talk a little Whisk Aviation. What do you guys got?
So I was checking out this article here in the Wall Street Journal. It says Boeing adds $450 million to air taxi effort. Whisk joint venture with Google co-founder Larry Page is developing pilotless electric aircraft.
Boo.
Yeah, I know, Google. But a very interesting, Boeing making a huge investment into developing these pilotless aircraft for short passenger hops in and around cities. They're going to be electric and autonomous. And so one thing that's interesting is they're trying to basically build this business starting with autonomy first. Some of these other ones, we've talked about these in the past, like Joby Aviation, that they're going to kind of do these like piloted air taxis. But this one, Whisk, is going to be completely autonomous. And obviously with Boeing making a huge investment, it kind of gets you kind of wondering what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
What do you got on that, Charlie?
It's definitely not airline ready replacement anytime soon.
Correct.
And that's way, way far down the road, I'm sure. But nonetheless, this is like science fiction kind of stuff. And I just can't even imagine this world where you've got these air taxis hopping around everywhere. First of all, I think about power lines. Like, what the heck? What are we going to do with all these power lines?
Yeah.
That people are going to run into. I mean, that's a real, you ask a helicopter pilot, man, they know where the power lines are. Anyway, it says sitting in traffic. This is on the Whisk website, whisk.aero. This is crazy stuff and very interesting. Sitting in traffic will soon be a thing of the past. With over a decade of piloted and autonomous flight experience, we've created the world's first all-electric, self-flying, vertical takeoff and landing air taxi. From day one, we've employed a safety-first approach. With 1,500 flights and counting, we're combining all-electric power, state-of-the-art autonomous technology, and vertical takeoff and landing capabilities with redundant design, stringent safety standards. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, emergency parachute, that's important. Automatic emergency parachute, that'll help. Transform the future of urban mobility. Now, one of the things yesterday, as we were looking and trying to learn more about this, was 25-mile range right now. So I don't know. I guess it's got to be really, really close to the cities. And because for me, there's not many places, 25 miles. I'm like, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm not doing a pre-flight. If I get a pre-flight for 25 miles, I'm not doing it.
And this got 30 minutes. It's probably like 30 minutes or who knows how long is the charging after 25 miles.
Right. Yeah.
But
I mean, is there going to be a logbook? I'm not filling out a logbook for this thing.
Yeah. It looks like, I'm just looking at the pictures here.
Yeah.
And the wingspan's pretty big for, something that's going to be an air taxi. Where's that going to land? What's that going to do for people? You're going to have your own helipad or whatever the heck you call this.
Right.
And then they can't be quiet. Like I would think in the city, there's going to be some noise.
When I think of Whisk, I don't think of planes. Whisk is something else.
It's like you stir something with, like you whisk something with.
Yeah, I'm going to
But
whisk.
here, hey, this is important, Rob. Aircraft type experimental. So that sounds bad, but what that does is that avoids a lot of FAA requirements, having that aircraft type. Aircraft classification, of course, eVTOL, which stands for electric vertical takeoff and landing. Fixed wing, it takes off like a helicopter, flies like an airplane. 1,500 to 5,000 feet AGL, 21-foot long wingspan, 21 feet long with a 36-foot wingspan. That's
What was that altitude again?
1,500 to 5,000 feet AGL.
Okay.
Let's see. 12 independent lift fans. Range, it says initially 25 miles plus reserves. Initially. Obviously, I don't think that's practical. I don't think you got a service if it's 25 miles, but that's where they're at right now. And
then
of
it
course,
has to what? You have to recharge the batteries?
I guess-
Obviously, I'm asking you guys like you're experts.
start gliding.
No, you're not
You
experts.
just
But
become a glider, I guess. I don't know.
yeah.
100
that's-
miles per hour. 100 miles per hour.
Hey, time to invest in lithium.
Yeah.
All these
Yes.
electric
Good call.
planes
Good
coming
call.
out. I just read this in the Wall Street.
Right on.
Hey, one thing, just really quick, I thought this was interesting. So, Boeing has laid the groundwork for its push into autonomous flight with the 2017 purchase of Aurora Flight Sciences Corp., a maker of aerial drones and pilotless flying systems. And they also bought in 2016 Liquid Robotics, which produced underwater drones. And so, they're putting in big money for these autonomous vehicles, and I don't know, a lot of
That's
innovation
interesting.
going into the aircraft development these days. Which who knows? The future is bright. I guess.
I've got one other piece of aviation news here. It's going to one up your silly Whisk
Let's see what you got.
news there. A YouTuber's plane crash draws doubts from aviation experts. So
I saw this.
Dude,
This
what?
is
apparently Trevor
crazy.
Jacob, allegedly he's being, accused of faking his airline crash because he's a big YouTuber. And so he fakes it, apparently, again, allegedly, he fakes like the plane's going down and has troubles and jumps out of the plane. He throws up a bunch of curse words and jumps out of the plane with his selfie stick in hand,
Oh my
videoing
gosh.
the whole thing.
Yes.
So obviously a lot of experts are wondering if it was a crash or is it publicity stunt.
Wow.
You be the
Yeah.
judge. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that was why. That was why I saw the video. Actually, that was quite interesting. The plane engine just quit. I mean, he was in the mountains, I saw, but just basically, engine cuts out, just jumps out of the plane with the parachute,
That's
parachutes
funny.
down, and films the plane behind him crashing through a mountain. And they are saying it's a
Crazy.
publicity stunt, and from what people are saying, but I'm sure he's getting investigated, and I'm sure they would
Yeah.
not be happy if
sure.
that was a stunt.
I'm
The
not sure
guy's
he's gonna
known
be
for kind of
flying.
doing some of these stunts, so that doesn't help his case either. Um,
I know I know a couple guys that parachuted out of, or had to eject out of airplanes. Charlie, I'm sure you do too. We might have to have
Oh, yeah.
one of on there.
We got a
Well,
bunch of clients that have done it.
Yeah.
We've got a handful
we?
of clients. Oh yeah.
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 Call sign shoot. I won't give away his real name just in case he doesn't want
Yeah.
to come on. But he'd be great on here.
Yeah.
Tell us his story. Out of a T-38. Ah,
Ooh.
fantastic. Anything else? Moving along. Are you making or have you made poor decisions when faced with market volatility and world events? Give a fiduciary fee only advisor a call. These lighthouses stand steadfast in the storm and should help you weather these unpredictable times. Here at Leading Edge Financial Planning, we believe in investing through the downturns, not market timing. As comprehensive financial planners, we aim to help you protect what is important to you, not just your money. If you feel so inclined, give us a call, 865-240-2292, or hit us up on email at info@leadingedgeplanning.com to sign up for the newsletter. Break. Why is the market tanking and what should you do about it? Guys, what do you got?
First of all,
Guys
is the
falling.
market tanking? I don't even know anymore. It's
Yeah,
confusing.
bounce back and now it's going
Bounce
back,
back.
down.
So Monday was down 1,000 points at one point. I think it was Monday. And it finished positive. All indices finished positive. I think all of them, which is crazy. I don't know that I've ever seen in one day down 1,000 and then finish positive.
And we're recording this January 26th, folks.
Yeah.
So
It's been an interesting beginning of the year. It was kind of quiet, I think. There wasn't this big one event. All of a sudden, boom, that scared everybody. We had a lot of little things, I think. In our notes, we kind of noted there's some Fed uncertainty going on. Maybe not uncertainty now, but it was at the beginning of the year where they released Fed notes January 5th. I think that caught people's attention. We've got inflation that's been hanging around. We've got this Russian-Ukraine uncertainty, which is getting more serious. We will acknowledge that, but that also has been around since 2014. If you revisit 2014, similar things have happened, although maybe they've definitely cranked up the intensity a notch or two, is what we've heard. COVID is always hanging around. I shouldn't say always. It feels like it's always been hanging around, and we felt like we would be past this by now. Literally, literally. I had it last time. You had it this time. We passed it through Zoom somehow. But I think everybody's got. Our nurse practitioner said, "Oh, everybody's got Omicron. If you feel bad, you've got Omicron." But I guess she's right. I don't know. Nonetheless, that is an impact. That's impactful on the stock market because it's an uncertainty and it makes people nervous. And when people get nervous and there's uncertainty, they flee equities, right? I mean, that's kind of, I don't mean to oversimplify. I don't mean to minimize any of these things that are very difficult and very serious, but that happens a lot.
And it continues to stop up the supply chain when there's more COVID concerns specifically. I mean, it seems like internationally there's new regulations that get put in as far as travel restrictions. I saw Europe had opened up travel in the European Union, but then shut it back down. And so that doesn't help with the supply issues that we have. It doesn't help with people calling in sick to work. We need people out there driving trucks. So, people are scared whenever they hear more.
They are scared, And the Fed, I'll just talk about the Fed just for a second. I know we don't want to harp on all these points too much because it is the topic du jour. There'll be another thing to be scared or uncertain about in the future. There always is. Just like on our last podcast, our 24 it was, we talked about there's always a reason to be scared and nervous. Again, not to minimize these things, but the Fed is very interesting. Some notes from the last Fed meeting, they said basically the path of the economy continues to depend on the course of the virus. Progress in vaccinations and an easing of supply constraints are expected to support continued gains in economic activity and employment, as well as a reduction in inflation. So there's some positive things going on if we can get past this virus, is what they're saying. And since there's positive things in the economy, and this is where people are like, what, are you crazy? That's why the Fed is raising rates. They don't raise rates in a really weak economy typically because that's why they pump money into the economy, because it's weak and it needs help, so to speak. Right. So that's the underlying interesting fact about the Fed and what they're doing. Otherwise,
anything with the Fed right now gets headlines too. It gets clicks, it gets views. I was watching CNBC with Kramer, and he's talking all about the Fed, and it's scary. People get concerned whenever you hear that term, but they're just doing what they normally do.
So we've got COVID, we've got the Fed, we've got Russia and Ukraine. What do we do about this? What should we do about it? What do you guys think? Obviously, we talk about this all the time, but the first thing that I started thinking of is we're gonna invest through the downturn, and we already I hit on that a little bit during our commercial break, but that's what I like to think about is, hey, especially if you're a long-term investor, this is a great time to stay the course, remember your game plan. Here at Leading Edge, we do what's called an investment policy statement, which is just the game plan, your playbook. And we say, hey, when a market downturn happens, this is what we've already thought about. And we've already simulated, just like in the airplane when you simulate, engine failures. We've simulated a market downturn of 30 to 40%. And you should have already thought, hopefully you've already thought, is my portfolio such that I'm okay with that? And we're gonna invest through it, which is good for young folks like you, Ben, particularly because you're buying at these cheap prices right now, right? So that's a good thing. You don't want to always be buying when it's going up all the time.
No, I thought it was too high. I want to come back down so I can afford some of this stuff.
That's right.
In fact, I was on the phone with my brother this week. Just he's 30 years old. I was like, hey, come on, it's time to get some money to work. Don't wait any longer. Let's do this. And giving him some free advice, which I shouldn't do. I really
charge him double. Charge your brother double.
But no, you're right. It is a great time to buy, and we don't. I mean, with the risk involved in investing in equities in general, I mean, you don't want to put dollars in there that you need within 5 years. Really, is about as early as you want to have money in there that if you need it. If you're not planning on spending it anytime soon, then just time to just ride it out.
And even Rob, you alluded to our younger investors, but even our folks near or in retirement are still long-term investors because they have to outpace inflation. That's the one thing that we're trying to fight. And there's strategies for folks that are near or in retirement. One of those that we like to use is the bucket strategy, where you separate you separate those accounts. The money that you need in the next 5 to 7 years is in certain accounts, and we physically open a new account, maybe a new IRA. We invest that in bonds and some conservative things there so that money is safe. And then bucket 3 possibly is all equity, and that is going to be very volatile. And if you're in retirement, you're going to look and you're going to physically see, hey, my bucket number 2 is very safe and secured. It's not gone down. And Russia is acting up and misbehaving, but yeah, my bucket 2 is very, very level, hopefully-ish. And it's not guaranteed unless we have some annuities or something like that to add in there. But that helps people. That helps people sleep better at night. Even if you're retired, you have to have the equities.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that 3-bucket strategy. And just to, if you haven't listened to previous podcasts, 3 buckets, some would say 0 to 5 years. You don't want much risk at all, if any, in that bucket. 5 to 10 or 5 to 15, depending on your preferences there. You can have some equities and some bonds and some cash, and then greater than the 10 to 15, whatever your preference is again, you can have equities in there and take on that risk. So unless your timeline and your time horizon is less than that 15, even as an older person, a senior, you can still have a lot of value in the stock market.
Yeah. And Rob, I think your question is perfect. All these things that we're concerned about, the headlines will dominate, but what do we do? What do we do as investors? Because we don't get our advice from the headlines. If we did, just like in our last podcast, we'd be in trouble. So what we need to realize is first, we got to have the right perspective, the right mindset. What does that mean? That means that volatility in the stock market is absolutely normal and it's absolutely expected, even though it's still very scary. As human beings, we don't like uncertainty.
Some might say that it's a market gyration. I've heard.
Market gyration, or market twerking.
Yes,
maybe
the
the market's just
market is
twerking
twerking.
around. That's what I like to use. I think
teed you up.
twerking. Almost forgot what it was again. I was like, what is this word? It's twerking. Anyway, yes, that's how we describe the market as twerking around. And
that's a technical term. I mean,
that's right. That's a scientific word.
You heard it here first.
That's right. That's right. So understand that it's somewhat normal. That maybe doesn't make it easier for people to see that, but it is normal. And like you said, if you're a saver, you can take advantage of that volatility. If you're a young investor, you get on your knees like William Bernstein said, and you pray that the market tanks so you can invest in all these great companies at a low price. It's also important to understand what I'm going to use a fancy phrase called systematic risk. And that sounds fancy, but to me, it's really important because it really means that it's the one risk that we cannot diversify away. In other words, business risk at Southwest Airlines is that somebody screws something up and the stock goes down. You can diversify that away by owning hundreds, thousands of companies. But systematic risk is when Russia invades Ukraine and the price of Apple goes down. Clearly, those are not related. And I should say, not just the price of Apple, but the price of all companies, the S&P 500 or a US broad market or an international ETF goes down. That's systematic risk. And that is just because people are selling, they're fearful, and so they're going to sell. That's their reaction. The stock markets in the short term, Benjamin Graham said, they're like voting machines. They reflect the emotional craziness, if you will, of people. So people get scared, they sell. That alone causes the price of Apple, Amazon, all the companies that we love to go down. That doesn't mean Apple, Southwest, any of these companies have changed one iota. Their business is still exactly the same. So that's systematic risk. Understand it's there. Understand you cannot diversify away from it. Unfortunately, we have to accept it and understand also that is why there is a return in the market. If there was no risk, there would be no return in the market. So that's important. The last thing I'll say there as far as mindset is if we listen and we react with fear instead of based on our plan and some other things we'll talk about that are more tangible here in a minute, then we can almost be assured that our returns will be lower. Somebody said one time that your investments are like a bar of soap. The more you handle them, the more you do whatever, the less you're going to have of it. And that's true because we've seen I challenge anyone to go on Google and look and find the money flows, money flowing into the stock market, money flowing out of the stock market. And for example, when the stock market goes down, money flows out. When the stock market goes up, money flows in. Guess what that means? It means people are buying high and selling low over and over and over again because they're fearful of what's going on right now. We also know, statistically speaking, that the average investor, the average equity investor, does very poorly because of all those behaviors that we're talking about. On average, you'll see numbers around 3-4% of the average equity investor, depending on what source you look at, but it's pretty low, and that's pretty scary, but we see it over and over again. And so that's the mindset that we just need to be aware of.
Well, and that's a good point, because that's why I don't touch my soap at all. I don't want to want to go away. So that's good. No, I'm kidding.
You don't need it. There's a study. You don't need soap,
You don't need
actually.
it.
You don't need
You
a
don't
soap.
need it.
No.
Overrated.
Well, wash your hands though, because you got COVID. But
I love it. Yeah, I think it's important, and we already hit on it, but that dollar cost averaging and monthly investing means, just to your point, Charlie, that you're buying more when the prices are low. Because if you're investing $1,000 or $100,000, doesn't matter. You're going to buy more shares of Apple and Google and Boeing and Whisk, I guess, apparently. And you know, conversely on that, when prices are so high, you're buying less shares.
Yeah, and everybody has the chance to do that, and it's called rebalancing. Even if you're in retirement and you're supposed to have a 60-40 portfolio, typically, and not this year because it's really not been bad enough. If you have a 60-40 portfolio over time, equities usually are going to do better, and you're going to sell those equities and then rebalance into bonds and maintain your 60-40 position. That's rebalancing. That's a portion of that. But the reverse is also true. When the stock market tanks, usually, and again, we're talking a serious recession or correction or whatever we want to call it, bonds may go up and stocks may go down. We don't know that's historically what's happened. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. That is a rebalancing opportunity for everyone to sell high bonds and buy low stocks. And we do that for our retirees if it's the right thing to do for them.
the intra-year declines that happen in the stock market, and we're talking about in a calendar year from January 1st to December 31st. And on average, it's 14% that the stock market declines each year. And each year we don't say we've hit a recession or the sky is falling, but each year that happens on average, and we don't even hardly notice it. So this could just be that time period for this year. Stocks go down, and then the rest of the year could be great. We don't know.
Yeah,
you definitely don't want to miss out on the fall, the going back up, which is the risk of selling now.
And that's when the good times typically occur, is right on the heels of a really nasty bad time in the market. And typically what people will miss out because they pull the money out of fear and then we think we can get back in at the perfect time. And next thing you know, you've missed those lumpy returns, really good lumpy returns that show up in a day or two and then are pretty mediocre to even the rest of the time. But I'm going to clarify or add on, Ben, to the statistics you talked about. Despite average intra-year drops of 14%, annual returns were positive 32 of 42 years. That's since 1980. This statistic is we've talked about before, but this particular one is JP Morgan Asset Management. They're all over the place, all over the internet. But it is fascinating because the markets, they will go down throughout the year. It's pretty typical.
What I love is that there's a bell that rings when we hit the bottom. That's awesome.
The cowbell.
Of course. Yeah. Where's your cowbell on that one, Ben? It would be nice if there were a bell that just says, hey, March 23rd, 2021, bottom of the COVID crash, right? Yeah. And I love that we had the professor, Kevin, was on earlier, and he's got a video up that's fantastic. Check it out. But he talks about, he actually had a video recorded on March 17th of 2020, not 2021, March 17th. And he's talking about how there's all this fear, and we're just going to stand fast and continue to do what our game plan says, which means you're going to continue to invest through that downturn. And then who is to know 6 days later the market's going to go on that V-shaped recovery, which was fantastic. So
crazy.
We don't have the bell. We don't know, and no one knows when the top's going to happen, nor when the bottom's going to happen.
Yeah. So I want to go back to these tangible things that we want to help people with. We've talked about a few of them. Rebalancing is critical, and it's hard to do. It sounds so simple. It's one of those, it almost becomes a cliche, but that's really takes a lot of discipline. But understand that's an opportunity. Tax loss harvesting, we don't want to get into the nitty gritty details of that, but it's a great opportunity to, some studies have shown that in a taxable account that can increase your rate of return over time, and it's very advantageous. Roth conversions, look for opportunities. If you're going to convert to Roth anyway, and your balance has declined, and you convert those shares, you get to convert the same amount of shares at a lower price, and it's going to save you on taxes. So that's a great opportunity. Couple more things, and people say, well, if you're not going to time the markets and you're going to sit on your hands, then what are you doing? Well, this is what we're doing. There's a lot of value in these things we're talking about, and in one of those things, you can dollar cost average into this if that's appropriate. You could also accelerate some savings. Hey, I've got some money on the sidelines. I was leaking into the market. It's down. Hey, why not put it in right now? Now, there's no guarantee. That's the bottom. We don't have that magic cowbell like you talked about, Ron. But nonetheless,
I'm working on it.
Let me just I've been talking a lot this time, and I've got two more points. One of them is we don't react to markets because we are proactive. What I mean by that is we understand people, and people have to understand themselves. Either do your homework or get some counsel, advisor, whatever. But we understand people's situations, circumstances, risk tolerance. And so you put in holdings in the investment portfolio that are going to protect you for the downturn. As soon as we invest someone's money, and as soon as any individual invests their money, expect the downturn the next day. Are you ready for it? Because it could happen anytime. You don't know when COVID-21 is going to hit or whatever. So that's why we have some things like bonds. We have some other maybe utilities that are not quite as volatile. You have different asset classes. You have international, you have emerging markets, real estate. Diversification is what we're talking about. And so, for example, if we knew exactly when the market was going to tank and when exactly it was going to recover, we really wouldn't need bonds for sure, because there's a cost to own them. So nobody would own bonds at all. We would simply remove them from the market, wait for the signal to sound off, and then we'd put them back in the market. Bonds never needed. But since we don't know that exactly, we're going to have some bonds. We're proactive. We already know the correction is going to happen at some point. So we have those other holdings, diversification. Some people say it's a ballast for the boat. That helps you in two ways. Bonds help you to not take as big a hit on a downturn. They reduce the loss, and they also help you recover quicker. We're not holding bonds because they have such an outstanding return. In fact, we don't expect hardly any return, but they do help to recover quicker, which is really critical for a near retiree, and they lessen the impact of a very steep downturn. So that's bonds.
I was just going to jump in there, Charlie. We talked about rebalancing already, but that's an important part of rebalancing is it gives you some of that dry powder to invest when the markets are down, and you can buy more when it's cheap. So
absolutely. Rebalancing, two types. You're going to rebalance from stocks to bonds. That's not something to increase your rate of return. That is something to manage risk, which is very, very important. Ask people in 1999 if they forgot to rebalance. They got hammered in 2000 on the tech stocks, right? So it takes a lot of discipline to do that. When things are going up, you don't want to sell them. There's also rebalancing. If you're a 100% equity investor, there is rebalancing between asset classes. That's very valuable, because there is going to be a time when large growth does really well, emerging markets does terrible, and you're going to sell the high one and buy the low one. That's rebalancing intra-asset class. And according to some folks, Kitsis has done some great studies showing that does add return over time, or can. So that's important. That difference is important. One of them is for risk. One of it can be for return. The last thing I'll say, because I'm talking too much today, is
nonsense. It's good
in
stuff.
the end,
gold, Charlie's gold.
All right, I'm going to keep going then. But in the end, as an investor in stocks, in any economy, any global economy, you have to have some level of faith that the world is not going to end, and that the economies, not just the US, but everywhere all over the world, are going to survive. So if you don't have that little bit of faith, little bit of optimism that we're going to get through this, then quite frankly, you probably should not be in stocks. And that sounds extreme and maybe weird for me to say that, but there are some people that think our world is headed in a really bad place. And therefore, anytime a headline comes out like this Russia-Ukraine thing, they're out. They're out because there's no faith whatsoever in that our system is going to survive, economically speaking.
But I would even challenge that, right? So you're out. Where do you go? What do you do?
Gold.
Yeah,
Because
you got inflation. I mean, and you see Bitcoin.
I mean, if
being
the world
tossed out
ends,
there, but
right, it doesn't matter if you have it in gold
That's right.
or
Yeah.
under your
Yeah.
mattress or in
Totally
your bunker.
agree.
Yeah.
a lot of people say throw it into Bitcoin. It's a big inflation hedge. I've heard that a lot. It's a common misconception, in my opinion, or it helps during downturns. You throw it into Bitcoin. We're seeing them right now go down together. But the reason we can say this about stocks is because stocks have underlying value in them. They're companies with employees that are businesses that have great ideas and great products that they're selling. So
And look at all that economies have been through. I mean, it's really insane to think about world wars. And I look at the 60s. People talk about now. I look at the 60s. I'm like, man, we thought for good reason the world was going to end in the 60s during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, there's a good chance we could have been a nuclear annihilation. So that's pretty scary stuff. But our economies, businesses survive. People are resilient. Through COVID, it's been amazing what we've been able to do. People, and I mean societies, is just survive. You know what I mean? And be resilient and run those companies, Ben, like you said, and make profits. The last point, number 7, that I'll make, and I'll recap because I know we've talked a bunch, jumped around, but there are really 7 of them, right? The last one is, if you don't have a plan, and plan may be another overused word, but if you don't know the why behind your investing, your strategy, why am I saving? Why am I investing? How, maybe the why between why do I own these investments? And to me, that's really kind of a plan. But if you don't have that, and it doesn't have to be a formal document, it doesn't have to be a binder, it can be a back of a napkin, we've said before, I don't think you're gonna do well. I think you're not gonna survive the tough times when things get a little squirrely, when things get a little uncertain, because you just haven't really thought about and thoroughly done your homework. You know what I mean? As far as having a plan and what we want to do. And does this affect me or not?
understanding why you have bonds and why you have stocks in your portfolio in general can help you to understand and create that plan. Because like you said, why do we have bonds in portfolios? It's for smoothing out the ride a little bit, faster recovery. Rob, I think you said a great point, having some dry powder in there, but also so that if the market equities crash, you can have some, and you're, for instance, in retirement, you can still have money to withdraw from an asset that is probably actually going up in a market crash. Coming up with a plan, it's also understanding why you even have these assets in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a lot of good stuff. I'm going to walk the dog here for a second, so just bear with me.
Walk it.
It reminds me of a LinkedIn article I just saw from one of our A10 buddies,
Nice.
pilot, call sign Soup. So anyways, he talked about applying the fundamentals we learn in pilot training to different things. And this is just a perfect example, I think, that is, an instance where pilot training just bleeds over into the investing world. And I think it's appropriate here. Anyways, the first, you know these very well, Charlie. Maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, and take the appropriate action. That is beaten into your head, as it should be, into every pilot's brain, at least Air Force wise. And now I know definitely from the Southwest world as well. So anyways, I think that's important and can be related when market downturns happen, or even any market event, any market twerk happens. Maintain aircraft control. Is everything okay? Notice it doesn't say maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, take the appropriate action. It doesn't say take the fastest action. It says take the most appropriate action. And also during the analyze portion of that whole process, we often talk about wind the clock, which back in the day actually used to mean wind the clock. Obviously in the digital world, it means hack a clock or start the clock, which means take a breath.
Yeah.
Things happen. Kramer's going nuts. Ukraine, COVID. Take a breath. Is the plane flying? Is anyone dying? Do you have a roof over your head? Do you have food on the table? Okay. Yes, that's all taken care of. Or no, no one's dying. The plane is still flying. Take a breath. Relax. Analyze what's happening. Hopefully you've prepared and you've simulated what what the scenario is about and you know what to do next, whether that's a bold-faced memory item or grabbing a checklist. In the financial world, obviously you're looking at, hey, what's my game plan? What's my investment policy statement? What have I already thought about? What I've already thought about I'm going to do in this circumstance. And remember, whether it was in your training or in real life scenarios, COVID crash, 9/11, 2008, 2009 financial crisis, and all the others. What should you have done? What did you do? And just think about that. You probably should have invested through the downturn, rebalanced, tax loss harvest, and continued the ride. I'm going to steal from Kevin again his video. He said, "When you're going through hell, just keep going." Obviously, Winston Churchill said that one. So, thank you for letting me walk the dog. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a great analogy. I love it because there's been many airplane crashes where they only crashed because of the first one. They didn't maintain aircraft control. In other words, it wasn't the emergency that killed them. It was the fact that they were so worried about something. There was some fear, there was some distraction. Maybe, in fact, I remember the airline accident where it was the faulty landing gear. And I can't remember the exact time frame, but they had a bad landing gear indication. I actually think they had good gear. They had 3 down and locked. They didn't know it, but everybody got so fearful and so task saturated about that, they end up crashing and killing people. So that's where that comes from. Those rules are written in
The
blood.
Everglades. Are you talking about the Everglades crash?
I
The
don't
light?
know. Probably.
Maybe take a
Probably,
look
yeah.
at
The
light.
bulb was burnt out or something, but
They had a bad bulb, bad indication, plane was fine.
Yeah.
And they descended right into the ground with a
Oh.
perfectly good airplane.
and I think that's perfect analogy, although tragic analogy, but sometimes we get just from the fear of the headlines alone, we end up harming ourselves in the markets because we take action on things or we take the wrong action, or maybe it's an emotional reaction. So yeah, that's perfect. I love that analogy, and I think we can learn a lot from that.
And along those lines, in the airline world and even in the fighter world, you usually have a wingman there. So phone a friend, call somebody,
Yeah.
say, "Hey, am I about to go
Yeah.
off the deep end here?" And,
Yeah.
and you can probably protect yourself from that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
good
Rob,
stuff.
let me summarize these 7 points. I think they're critical, is because
Hit
we
'em.
want to really just drive home what is it that you can do, because I think the feeling of like I can't do anything really bothers people, and that's kind of normal in all of us. So the 7 things we talked about today: if the market is tanking, what do you do? Don't sell, first of all, and like Rob said, hack the clock. What we used to say in the fighter world: smoke a lucky. That was from Chuck Yeager. Smoke a lucky. Just smoke a lucky. Hang tight. It's okay.
You can't smoke in the cockpit anymore.
Okay, yeah, no more
Charlie.
smoking. But
you're old.
number 1, tax loss harvesting. 2, Roth conversions. 3, rebalance, and possibly rebalance into the pain. Okay, that hurts a little bit. That's why I said it that way. You could accelerate savings if you think if it's convenient for you. I wouldn't, I might continue my dollar cost averaging plan, Rob, like you said. If that just fits into my budget life better, then either one of those work great. Rely on your plan. What are your plan's assumptions? Oftentimes we assume 6 to 7% in a plan, fairly conservative. A bad year is expected. It's baked into those planning assumptions. Diversification works. You have to diversify. Don't get caught up in this tech stuff and high growth and chase after those returns, because it will affect your diversification. When the market tanks, you're probably gonna regret that. Number 7, you got to have some kind of faith in that the overall economy is going to survive, regardless of Russia, Ukraine, COVID, whatever natural disaster comes next. It's going to be something. So those are our 7 points, 7 action items that we hope help people to have some kind of sense of control and reduce that uncertainty, reduce the stress, and go out and enjoy your life.
I love it.
Love it.
Nice.
I'm
Nice
sure we could
wrap
talk
up.
more about this too. Just give us a call. We'll
Give us a call.
talk your ear off about this stuff. This is what we
We'll talk
like.
you to sleep. We'll talk you to sleep, and then for sure you won't be worried about it.
I'll talk market
You-
working every day, all day.
Rob will talk you to sleep using his bedroom voice. Don't worry. About it.
Oh,
I'm going to get over this COVID soon. And then there goes the bedroom.
Call him quick.
too funny.
Oh, I love it. Well, along those lines, most of like what you just covered, Charlie, a lot of that is you've prepared for in advance.
Yeah.
And then some of it you're doing right away. But the 2 quotes I have: just keep that in mind as I say this. The first one's from Jack Bogle, which I'm stealing from Kevin, but don't do something, just stand there. So that's a good, just stay the course, stay the course. The second one is Both Bull and Bear Can Be Your Friends by Mohit Bansal. He's an investor over, I think, at Wells Fargo. That's it. We've arrived at our final destination. Let's be the first to welcome you to the end of Why is the Market Tanking and What Should You Do About It? Again, thank you for joining us here at the Pilot Money Guys podcast. If you have any questions or like anything answered on the show, shoot me an email at robert@leadingedgeplanning.com or sign up for our newsletter at leadingedgeplanning.com. If you liked what you heard, or even if you didn't, still hit that subscribe button so we can reach more people. And remember, as Emerson said, the world makes way for those who know where they are going. So plan accordingly. From all of us here at Leading Edge, take care.